Hi everybody, Jane here, and today we're doing my March wrap-up, or part 2 of it. I had originally filmed a mid-month wrap-up, which I'm going to be labeling as wrap-up part 1, and this will be wrap-up part 2. I wasn't able to post it mid-month as I'd intended because almost like the day after I recorded it, I came down with an upper respiratory infection that turned into pneumonia. So I have not been uploading or posting videos or recording videos for quite a bit. So I'm using today to catch up. It's been a busy reading month. I got a lot read, partly because of being down sick. I just had more reading time than I typically do. And it's been a good reading month, but I definitely don't feel as good about it as I hoped I would. I read a lot of books. I had some pretty big disappointments. I had some books that were okay. I think I had one 5-star, which was on the first part of the month. And everything since then has been okay. I had a couple DNFs. We'll get to all of it. But it's definitely been an okay reading month. Quantity-wise, it's been great. Quality-wise, I was a little disappointed in some of the books I read. So let's get to it. I will be putting timestamps at the bottom, so if you want to hear about a specific book or don't want to hear about a specific book, you can kind of jump around. So I'm going to start with the 2 books that I didn't finish at all. And the first one of those is Fly By Night by Frances Hardinge. So I didn't get very far into this because I was really confused by what it was about. There's a futuristic society where you're not allowed to read, and our main character is Mosca, and she can read. Her parents are dead. She's being raised by an uncle. She almost immediately sets fire to the barn to escape because they're mistreating her a little bit Harry Potterish. They're like, aunt and uncle aren't taking good care of her, treating her like crap. So she escapes with this goose and meets this guy who is a con man, and they start traveling together. I just found this book really confusing. I found the world really confusing. It wasn't for me. So yeah, I think I got 3 chapters in and was done. The second book I DNF'd was A Blind Guide to Normal. And this is about a little boy who has vision problems, and he's been in a school for the visually impaired up to this point, and he decides, well, because of things happening in his family, he has to go back to a public school. His dad has had this really great work opportunity, and so kind of since stuff happens out of his control. I didn't get very far in this one either. I didn't love the narrative voice. It is told in first person, and I didn't care for it. I wasn't connecting to him. He was kind of a brat, I thought. I didn't like some of the things that he felt about other people. It wasn't for me. Now, the next book was not a DNF. I finished it except for a section. I will be rating it a 3 out of 5, but I did want to tell you that I didn't finish all of it. And that is Adventures in the Screen Trade by William Goldman. And this is William Goldman talking about his life as a screenwriter. It's good. It's interesting. I don't know that I got anything out of it as a just writer. It was maybe not as entertaining as I would have liked it to be because it's so old, and I didn't take that into account. This book was written before I was born, I believe. He said it was in 82. And so let me see when it's actually copyrighted. 83. So this book was written the year I was born. So obviously Hollywood has changed. A lot of the movies and stars and stuff he talks about are things that I've never heard of. So on a certain level it was interesting, and I know he has like a second book about Hollywood, and I might pick that out because I'd hope it's a little more modern and stuff that happened during my life when I actually wasn't an infant baby. But this was interesting to see like the issues in Hollywood and working with actors, and it was cool, but it was also kind of slow and boring in places, and like I said, if it's outside of your lifetime, probably not as interesting as it could be otherwise. I did read 2 graphic novels. I'm not going to be doing full reviews on them, so I'm going to kind of show you them, talk to you briefly about them, but normally on my channel I do full reviews on most of the things I give a rating to. Not going to do that this time, just because I didn't think they warranted it. This is the graphic novel edition of Anthem. I gave it a 3 out of 5. It was okay. The issue I had, or the main thing I didn't like, is that it's not in color. And I felt like it would have been a lot more powerful and a lot better had it been in color. This is a story about a man who is in a dystopian society. His name is Equality 72521 when we start the story. And he kind of ends up going against this dystopian society. Not necessarily going against it, but running away from it. I feel like most people have an idea, have heard of this at least, and on the back it does say that I is kind of the point of this book. He learns to go from a society of we to a society, or to I. He learns what I means and the importance of I as an individual. In their society, they are numbers and they are a collective. So when he starts talking, he'll say things like, "We will not let the golden one be sent to the palace of mating." And he doesn't mean we as in we, he means we as in himself, but he doesn't have a sense of himself as a himself. So it's a cool story if you've never read Anthem. I found out as I was reading this that I had read it before because my brother keeps recommending it to me. And it is a good story. I just, again, as the graphic novel, I thought it would have been more powerful in color. Definitely Anthem as a story I had read before, and it's worth reading. Maybe skip the graphic novel. It had some good things, some bad things, but I thought it would have been better in color. The other graphic novel I read was a 4 out of 5 for me, and that is The Handmaid's Tale. This, unlike the other one, has absolutely beautiful illustrations and colors, and it just is really important and beautiful, and I thought it did an excellent job of really showing the lack of individuality among the girls. This is a birth scene, and you can see all of the handmaids here in red, and they're basically, you can't tell them apart. And then the wives in blue, and you can't tell them apart either. So I really thought that this was a good view of the story. I'd seen the movie, the old movie that they had made. I haven't watched the season yet of The Handmaid's Tale, and I had read the book, so I knew what I was getting when I got into it. It was what I wanted from it. It was really good. It was entertaining. It did kind of focus more / make me notice more than I had in previous readings the difficulties of life for all the women, and not just focused on the abuse of the handmaids. And there was one part in this that I didn't remember from previous books, or from the previous books, that was the Econo wives, which are women who wear these outfits. They probably were mentioned in the book, and they don't really take place in the comic, but I'd never had my attention drawn to them before. And so that was kind of something new that I got out of this, which was nice. And they are the cheap and skimpy dresses that mark the women of the poorer men. They are not divided into functions. They have to do everything. Whereas, other families, the wealthy families, have the handmaids, which do the uterus breeding thing. The wives, who I'm not really sure what their functions are, to be honest. The Marthas, who take care of the house and stuff like that. So I did think I got something different out of this version of the book, or this graphic novel, that I did necessarily when I watched the book and movie, or watched the movie and read the book, although that had been a long time ago. The only minor complaint I have about this graphic novel is that if you haven't read The Handmaid's Tale or don't really know what's going on, I felt like some of the introductory stuff might have been hard to follow and could be very confusing to just be thrown into this world without any kind of, hey, this is what happened. So that was my only real complaint about it. Otherwise, I loved it. All right, the rest of the books I'm going to be showing to you and talking about it, I am going to be doing full reviews on, so I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. My ebook read of the month was A Perfect Child. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It is a story about an orthopedic doctor who is called in to treat a child who has been abused, and he basically just loves her and decides that him and his wife, who have been suffering from infertility, should adopt her. Unfortunately, she has a lot of mental health problems, and it starts causing problems with them in their marriage, and they bit off more than they could chew when they decided to adopt this child that has mental health problems and very high needs. So that's kind of what the story is about. I don't remember if it's meant to be a thriller. It kind of has some thriller elements to it, like as a domestic thriller, but it was really good. Really enjoyed it. Loved that they discussed mental health issues in children, because I feel like that's something that's under-discussed. And if you follow my channel, you know that's something that affects our lives. I have a daughter with a mental health issue, not at all as severe as The Perfect Child. Like in that book, the girl is probably a 9 to 10 for severity, whereas my child is probably like a 1 to 2 for severity. But I definitely had some of the stuff that they went through, we'd seen on a milder form in our daughter, and it was really cool to see that representation and to have the mother in the story feel and think things that we'd gone through, and to have the same problems of finding help that we did. It was a very personal story for me. I really enjoyed it. So let's start on the paperbacks, and I'm going to go through my 3 stars of the month first. So the first one we have is To Stay Alive, and this is a story about the Donner Party. It is based on Mary Ann Graves, who was a real person who was in the Donner Party, and it is written in verse. It is basically her writing verses about their experience of being part of the Donner Party. I think the reason I gave it a 3 out of 5 is because as it was written in verse, it was really hard for me to connect to the story, to the characters in the story. Like, I didn't care when they died, and it was really hard for me to follow who was who because there was such a big cast. And again, they couldn't alter that because there was really a fairly big family that traveled here, the Graves family, but it just maybe wasn't the right person to follow. I don't know how they could have improved it, but it was okay. I loved the insight into the Donner Party, and there was stuff I learned about the Donner Party that I didn't really know before. Like, she was part of the first team that went out and tried to get help. And I think I wasn't aware that that had happened. I kind of had imagined that people just stayed in their little cabins and died and ate each other. But that's not what happened. And Mary was one of the first wave of people, I think, to try and go get help for the group. So I don't want to not recommend this. This was really good. For me, it fell a little bit flat because it was told in verse, and I think this is maybe a story that would have been better not told in verse. My next 3 star of the month was A Bear Called Paddington. This is a children's classic, and basically this family adopts a bear called Paddington who can talk and think and loves marmalade. And this book is just a series of stories about Paddington and his adventures. And I think the thing I didn't like about it is there's not really it's more like a collection of short stories of things that happen to Paddington. There's not really a plot weaved through it. It's just Paddington shows up and he gets into trouble and he gets into trouble and he gets into trouble. And each different short story is about a different element of like the trouble he goes into. Like Paddington goes underground, and so he has an adventure in the subway station. And then I think there's one called He Paints a Picture, where he paints over somebody else's picture by accident and accidentally enters it in a contest and wins. It's cute. And I'm planning on doing a comparison to this in the movie, because the movie, they actually gave it a plot line, which was kind of cool. They took the same characters but added a plot line to it. So, but for the book, it wasn't really for me, although I think this is something that is common in older children's classic, because I heard Murphy Napier talking about Mary Poppins, and she had the same complaint about Mary Poppins as I had about this book. So it could be something that is fairly typical for the time period. It just doesn't work for me. The next book that I gave a 3 out of 5 to is The School for Good and Evil. So you have these two friends, and in their world, children go missing and become part of fairy tales. And Sophie really wants to become a princess. And Agatha is her best friend, and she just, wants to stay where she is. Everybody predicts that they will take Agatha to be a witch or, a villain in a fairy tale. And it happens that both girls are taken. However, they get sorted into the wrong houses according to kind of what they were thinking. She goes into the villains, and she goes into the princesses. I really love the premise of this story. I wanted to love this story, but I really hated the world building. I loved the characters, I loved the basic of the plot, but the way this world was set up did not work for me, and I didn't care for it. Alright, so jumping into my 4-star reads. I read a manga. This is the first manga I've read, and I read both of them. So it is My Brother's Husband, and this is about a man who is living in Japan with his daughter. He's a single dad, and his brother had gone to Canada and had passed away, and his brother was gay and was married to Mike. And Mike comes for a visit to meet his husband's family and to kind of see where his husband came from. I really enjoyed this. It was really a lot of fun, really good, definitely worth reading if you like manga. It did take me a little bit to learn how to read them, because with manga you read them backwards, and I wasn't prepared for that. I'd never read manga before. So I'd heard somebody on BookTube recommend this. I'm glad they did. It was a great read, but a little bit of a learning curve as to how to read it. The next book I read for a book club that I was taking part in, and that is Confessions of a Domestic Failure. So this book is about a fairly new mom. She's got a 9-month-old baby, and she is just kind of not doing as well as she would like to be. There is a woman named Emily who is like the social media mother of the year type, and she is launching a new book, I think. She's doing something, and she is getting 12 women together to try to help them become these domestic goddesses, and she's teaching them different things, and at the end they get to go stay at her mansion for a week. And so a lot of this is this girl's kind of failure as she tries to do the things Emily tells her. And then she gets to the mansion and meets Emily, and things are not quite what they seem. This was fun. It was a fun read. I loved it. It's very chick lit when you read it, like it's told that kind of tone-wise. I didn't necessarily love where the book went, and I thought it was going other places that I thought would have been more appropriate. We did talk about it in book club, and nobody loved it. A lot of people enjoyed it, so it's not bad. A couple people really thought that the main character was being overly dramatic. And like looking back, I can kind of see that. Her name is Ashley, and she only has a 9-month-old child, and she can't keep her house together at all. She can't cook meals, the basics. And like, I understand how hard that is because I'm a mother of twins. But I'm like, you have one child who's, not that. It doesn't seem like they're super hard to take care of. I feel like she was maybe over-exaggerated. But not a bad book. Fun. I was expecting something a little different. The next book I have for you is Walking with Miss Millie. And this is a middle grade. I don't know if I mentioned this. I took part in middle grade March. Although, because of taping this 2 different ways, and also my DNFs and stuff, I ended up like, my TBR was all about middle grade March, and I read a lot of the middle grade March, but I kind of lost my focus halfway through the month. I did end up reading a book from each of the challenges for middle grade March, I'm pretty sure. But this was my second pick for diversity. My first pick had been The Blind Side of Normal, but I didn't love that one. So this was my second pick, and that is Walking with Miss Millie. So Walking with Miss Millie is about a little girl who moves to a new neighborhood. Her brother is deaf, and she becomes friends with an African American lady. And she kind of learns about that woman's experience, and Miss Millie helps her reflect kind of on her own life and her own situation. This was fun. It was cute. I cried. I really don't have anything negative to say about it. It's what I want out of a nice, cute middle grade book. It wasn't anything like mind-blowing best book of the year, but it was a good solid 4. And the last book of the month that I read is The Man Who Wouldn't Stand Up by Jacob M. Appel. This was one that I won through a Library Things giveaway, and was sent to me by the author, so thank you for that. That does not influence, by the way, how I feel about it. It was a 4 out of 5 for me. It is about a man who chooses not to stand up during he's at a ball game with his nephew, and they are playing America the Beautiful in remembrance of the recent death of some soldiers, and he chooses not to stand up. And I think in the moment he's just like kind of in a bad headspace and makes a split-second decision. However, he gets caught on camera and it becomes national news, and he has people protesting at his house, and it's kind of his reaction to it. And note that this is like a satire. It's not meant to be a really serious book, I don't think. I had a good time with it. It's funny and it's over the top, but still making some interesting political points. There were some really cool characters in it. Overall, I had a good time with it. I did think in some places, like, I really enjoyed the first 3/4 of the book. The last quarter of the book I didn't love as much. So there is that. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that this book has some kind of weird formatting. So if you pick it up on my recommendation, just know that ahead of time. I hate to point that out, but I'm going to anyway. So like here you have a page where the chapter ends here, and then you have a blank page, and just some kind of unusual formatting. And that can totally happen with indie books. And I'm not at all saying let that sway you not to read it, but I just feel like I would be remiss if I didn't say the formatting throughout the book is a little bit weird like that sometimes. But otherwise, it was a good book. It was fun. It was entertaining. Again, not a runaway hit, but a nice solid 4-star read. So those were all the books that I read in March. Most of them will be having full review videos. So stay tuned for that, or keep an eye open for that. If there's ones that you really wanted to hear about in more detail, be sure to watch. And my social media links are below if you'd like to add me on Twitter or Goodreads or anything like that. Twitter is a good place, and so is Facebook if you want to keep up with anything going on in my personal life, because that's kind of where I posted when I was sick and wasn't able to post videos. Normally, when I'm not sick, I post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. But I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to keep that up for a little bit until I get recovered. So like and subscribe button are down below as well. I would also, in the comments, if you want to tell me about what you read in March, what was your best read and what was your worst. And if you participated in middle grade March, I would love to hear about the books you read for that. All right, guys, this is Jane. Talk to you the next time. Bye.